In a small, picturesque village nestled deep in a valley surrounded by towering, snow-capped mountains, there lived an old painter named Elias. His hands, though aged and weathered, were steady as he brought his canvases to life with scenes of vibrant meadows, bustling markets, and serene lakes. His paintings weren't just images, they were windows into the soul of the village. But despite his fame, Elias had never painted the mountain that loomed over the village, the majestic peak that touched the sky and seemed to glow golden at sunrise. Known as the Eternal Peak, the mountain had become a symbol of resilience and mystery for the villagers. One day, as Elias sat in his workshop, a little girl named Amara wandered in. She was one of his most curious admirers, often watching him paint from the doorway. Her bright eyes sparkled with curiosity as she gazed at the blank canvas on his easel. "Mr. Elias," she asked, tilting her head, "why haven't you painted the Eternal Peak? It's the most beautiful thing in our village." Elias paused, his brush hovering in midair. He sighed and looked out of the window toward the mountain. "Some things," he said softly, "are too grand to capture. The mountain isn't just a sight, it's a feeling. And feelings are hard to paint, little one." Amara frowned, unsatisfied with his answer. "But you've painted the sunrise, and that's a feeling. You've painted the market, and that's alive with laughter. Maybe you're just scared to try." Her words stung, but they were honest. That night, Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The mountain had always intimidated him, not because of its size but because of its meaning. It wasn't just rock and snow. It was the guardian of the village, the silent witness to generations of life. How could he possibly do it justice? The next morning, Elias made a decision. He would climb the mountain to see it up close, to understand its spirit. If he was going to paint it, he needed to experience it, not from afar, but from its heart. The climb began early the next day. The villagers gathered to watch him go, offering advice and warnings. "The Eternal Peak is no easy climb," said an elderly farmer. "The winds are harsh and the paths are steep." But Amara simply smiled at him and said, "I know you can do it." Elias packed his supplies, a sturdy walking stick, a flask of water, some bread, and his sketchbook. The lower slopes of the mountain were gentle, covered in wildflowers and shaded by tall trees. The air was crisp, and the songs of birds accompanied him. But as he climbed higher, the path grew steeper and rockier. The wind whistled through the cliffs, and the temperature dropped. He encountered a goat herder sitting on a boulder, his head in his hands. "Are you all right?" Elias asked. The herder looked up, his face etched with worry. "I lost my flock in the storm last night. They're scattered, and I don't know where to start." Elias offered him a kind smile. "Sometimes, we find things by not looking for them directly. Walk with me a while, maybe we'll see them along the way." Sure enough, as they climbed a little farther, the herder spotted his goats grazing in a sheltered valley. He thanked Elias profusely and offered to accompany him, but Elias insisted he return to his animals. Further up, Elias slipped on a patch of ice and scraped his arm. As he bandaged it with a strip of cloth, he saw a traveler limping down the path. The man had twisted his ankle and was struggling to descend. "Here," Elias said, offering his walking stick. "Take this. I'll be fine without it." The traveler hesitated but accepted. "You're kind, old man. Be careful, the higher you go, the more the mountain tests you." Elias continued, his pace slower but his resolve steady. Near the summit, he found a widow placing a wreath of flowers by a small cairn of stones. She explained that her husband had died on the mountain many years ago, and she came every year to honor his memory. Elias sat with her for a while, listening to her stories. When she finally rose to leave, she looked at him and said, "The mountain takes much, but it also gives. I hope you find what you're looking for." At last, Elias reached the summit. The view took his breath away. The village below looked like a scattering of tiny toy houses, and the horizon stretched endlessly, painted in hues of gold, silver, and blue. The wind roared in his ears, but instead of feeling small, he felt connected, to the mountain, to the village, and to every person he had met on the way up. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw. But this time, he didn't focus solely on the peak. He drew the herder with his goats, the traveler with the walking stick, the widow with her wreath, and the villagers bustling far below. He realized that the mountain wasn't just a solitary giant, it was a part of everyone's lives. When Elias returned to the village, he spent weeks turning his sketches into a masterpiece. The final painting showed the eternal peak surrounded by life, children playing in the fields, farmers working in the valley, the herder and his goats, and even the widow laying her flowers. When he unveiled the painting, the villagers gasped. Amara was the first to speak. "You didn't just paint the mountain, you painted all of us." Elias smiled, his heart full. The mountain isn't just rock and snow. It's the people who live in its shadow, who give it meaning. That's what makes it eternal. From that day on, the painting hung in the village hall as a reminder that even the grandest things in life are made richer by the connections we share.